Hi, you guys. Welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I am the Happy Crafty Homemaker. And today we are doing a viewer requested video. I am calling it What Came First, the Pattern or the Product, or the pattern. What came first, the pattern or the project? That's what I call it. Anyway, we will have a show and tell next week. Normally, this would be the day that I upload a show and tell. However, I've had a number of people ask about this, and based on how my upload schedule has been with the make-alongs and the subscription boxes and things like that, I did want to make sure I brought this in. So Thursday it is. So I want to begin this video with the caveat real quick. This is based on my process, the way I work, my methodology. If you do things and approach things differently, let us know in the comment section down below. I am a firm believer that by having knowledge of our greater community and seeing how other people do it, we can better identify things within ourselves and how we craft and how we do things. There is no right or wrong way. This is like knife hold versus pencil grip on a crochet hook. Neither one is wrong. They both give you the same stitch. They both give you the same product at the end of the day. This is just what's comfortable for you, what works for you, how to make, while this is a consuming craft, how to make it not taxing and consuming and frustrating for you, but how to make this a good experience for you. So this is my process video. This is not, your process or somebody else's process. This is just how I approach knitting and crochet and how I approach starting new projects and thinking about new projects. Excuse me. So leave a comment down below. Let me and everyone else know what your process is. How do you think about these things? How do you approach these things? And share your knowledge with the greater community as well. The other thing I want to say is a lot of what I'm going to say has kind of been said in bits and pieces over the years here in the channel, including why stash shaming harms crafters, how to build a stash wisely, and also things like the charts and tools video that I did discussing about places where you can find these charts and lists and things that you can print out and keep on hand in your wallet and your purse and your crafting binder, wherever you would keep them to use them. So we'll reference those again as this video continues on, but know that there are other videos here within this Crafty Chat playlist that hit on these same topics. So if you want to see more about my opinion on these things, read the comments, because there are some amazing comments in those videos. Read the comments that other people have said about, their process, how they look at things, how they think about things. The comments are excellent because, once again, I am only one person with one methodology and one process. The world is your oyster if you're trying to find yourself in crafting, though. So I want to start off the video. The question really is, how do I approach knitting and crochet when I'm starting a new project? What came first, the pattern or the supplies? I think I made it a little bit catchier for the title of the video. I did make a number of notes of points that I really wanted to make as part of this, but first off, I want to address the fact that 85 to 90% of the time, when I want to start a new project, I come up here, look at my yarn and go, what do I want to work with? So for me, this comes first. Picking my supplies and tools generally is one of the first things I do. Even when I'm card making, I pick my paper pad before I pick designs to make. Or card sketches to base things off of. I am very much a supply-driven crafter, and I've talked about this a number of times. I am inspired by color and texture, and the number one place your project can get color and texture is going to be your supplies. So I am very much supplies first when it comes to crafting. Now, having said that, this plays directly into how I stash yarn. And there have been some updates to my process with that since I made the original How to Build a Stash Wisely video. I've personally changed some of the things that I'm doing as well, or being aware of them as I'm going. But when I'm stashing yarn, one of the number one things I do, if I see a yarn where I'm like, oh, I really like that, I really want to work with it, what would that be? Would it be a hat? Would it be a scarf? Would it be a shawl? Would it be a sweater? Would it be a blanket? Ooh, that can make really fun hair on an amigurumi. I think about those things when I'm looking at a yarn, especially a yarn that is on more than 60% discount or is on like last chance clearance. And I'm like, ooh, I kind of like that. Now, for me, over the years of just experience of knitting and crocheting for so long, I have been crocheting for 36 years. I've been knitting for almost 20 years now. So for me, I know 700 to 900 grams of yarn will get me a sweater. If I'm thinking, like a thigh length tunic, I need closer to 900. If I'm thinking something that, just barely covers the rear end, then yeah, I'm looking at more like a 700-gram sweater. But I know this from experience. I know this from experience of working with things, making things for myself, knowing how I like things to fit and feel for myself. You might not be there yet. And there are tools and references out there that you can print out and keep in your wallet, in your project notebook, wherever you will see it, or keep it on hand, or just keep it, pinned on your, save it as a screenshot on your phone or something that you can see when you're out physically shopping somewhere, or save it somewhere on your desk. If you're going on the online yarn purchasing extravaganza, you can see it and at least be able to say, okay, yeah, I really like this, but I think this is more of a shawl. So I need 3 or 4 balls of this. I don't need 25 balls of this. There are a number of times where, I have overbought just because the way to get the deal meant purchasing more. Case in point, my Heartland yarn here. This is Lion Brand Heartland. At the time I bought this was $1 a skein if I purchased an entire case. So a friend and I split the case on this yarn. I paid for half of it. She paid for half of it. And I knew I wanted a sweater and an over large Granny Ruana shawl wrap thing out of it. So I knew I needed probably 9 skeins for a sweater. And I was probably going to need 6 or 7 to do that shawl because it's a huge Ruana poncho shawl. So half a case was probably more than what I needed for these projects. But at $1 a skein, I still save substantial amounts of money. And it's a yarn I love. And like now that I've got the Addie, my Addie loves this yarn. This just glides through that machine. So having extra on hand is not a problem. Same thing when I purchased this Vanna's Choice. This was purchased to be a jelly bean Afghan or a heart ripple Afghan. I did not purchase the white yarn at the time that I got this yarn, but I did purchase the colors for that Afghan. Once again, these were in a bundle deal where I think it was like 10 for $9. So I paid under $1 a skein for each of these at the time I bought them. And so, yeah, I probably got more than what I need for the blanket, but that's fine because I really enjoy using Vanna's Choice yarn. So I do, when I come across those like uber good deals where you do stash up, you do want to purchase a lot, ooh, am I going to have FOMO for not buying this because this is 75% off? Take a breath. Think about what that yarn is going to be. Is it something you're actually going to use? Now, I have fallen into this with yarns that I definitely wasn't going to use. I still don't know why I thought I was going to use them, and I purchased them. So take a few minutes when you come across those deals and think about, what will this project be? How can I use this? Am I going to love this? Have I already used this? These are all questions you should be asking yourself before you buy 25 hanks of faux fur yarn or 25 skeins of faux fur yarn. The next thing that I have here is I also consider the color and the texture of the yarn. So I will look at a color and be like, is this really something that if I put it on my wall, I am going to say, ooh, I want to work with that? Or is it going to be a color where I'm like this orange stripy yarn here, I'm never going to be inspired to be like, ooh, but I bought that for a project for a specific person. So I see it every time I'm in here. I'm just not like, oh, I have to work with that. Versus, like my purple yarn here where it's like, ooh, I love that. I really want to work with that today. Also, texture is a big deal. So if it's a yarn you've never worked with before, I do highly recommend not purchasing in bulk. That's one of the ways we get ourselves in trouble. And in 10 years, we're going to be looking at this in our stash going, what was I thinking? And you're going to have some like buyer's remorse on that. And it's hard to declutter things once you have purchased them. Now, not saying that your choices and taste won't change. They do. And mine have changed dramatically over the last 30 years as to what I love, what I want, what I expect from a yarn, and what I expect out of my projects. But if from day one, this isn't a yarn you would consider paying 70% of versus 30% of, it might not be the yarn you want to purchase and add to your stash if you want to see it when you come in here and want to work with it. And I've fallen prey to this. This is one of those lessons learned things. And those will hide the yarns you do want to work with. So now you're missing out on the stuff that you do want to work with because it's hidden by the stuff you don't want to work with. So if it's a new to you yarn, I would not recommend purchasing in bulk, even if it is 70% off. If it's a colorway that will be a gift for somebody, limit the amount you purchase. Don't let it overwhelm your stash. But it's okay to buy those yarns. Being able to make gifts for people at a reasonable price is still a good thing. So I'm not saying don't ever stash the yarns that just don't sing to you. But be conscientious of where those yarns are in your stash and the purpose you're buying that yarn for and why you're holding on to that yarn in your stash. Another thing is there are mainstay yarns that are they've been around forever. They will continue to be around forever. These yarns aren't going anywhere. So for the LYS mainstay yarns, I buy them as I need them for projects. If I'm buying like Cascade 220, I don't stash that. I just buy that when I need it for a project. If I decide that's the yarn I want to use for a project, I just buy it when I need it because those don't really go on sale or super sale very often unless they're discontinuing a color. And then once again, you come back to is this a color I want to see all the time and have in my face all the time and think about all the time? But I mean, there have been a couple over the years where, I've wished I had purchased things when they were being discontinued and I found them at 50 and 60% off that are in that LYS, Plymouth, Cascade type zone. But they're reasonably priced. They're not super expensive yarns. So just buying them as I need them for a project really isn't a problem. It's generally the same price unless, it's like the Eat Sleep Knit deals for Black Friday where you get like the mystery discount at the end of your purchase, something like that. Yeah, you might want to buy like your projects for the next 2 years or 1 year using that yarn. That's a deal that's every year. So you might, next 6 to 8 months worth of yarn in those types of yarns, you might want to go ahead and purchase when there is a sale or a store discount going on. But it's not something I purchase and stash up on the regular. I generally just purchase it by the project as I need it or want it. Now with the big box yarn stores. I look at those differently. So a lot of those, they're on regular sales cycles of 4 to 8 weeks. I know with the Joanne bankruptcy and purchased by the liquidation company and everything else, this is an opportunity where a lot of people are going to be purchasing a lot of like the big twist yarns and things like that they love. But there's always companies, like Premier, Hirschner's, Mary Maxim, those yarns. I mean, a lot of the stuff from Yarn Inspiration, the Red Heart Super Savers, the Hobby Lobby, I love this yarn. Those yarns regularly go onto a 20 to 40% off sale, cycling every 4 to 8 weeks. So if there's something I need for a project, I either try to catch one of those sales or I wait for the next sale to cycle around. I don't stash those yarns anymore. Now, the one exception would be something like if Premier puts a certain yarn on clearance where it's, 70% off, and it's one of those colors I love. I love their anti-pilling line. It's one of my all-time favorite top of the line acrylic yarns I've ever used. So if they've got a colorway of that they're discontinuing and I'm in love with, I might go ahead and stash a large quantity of that for a rainy day. But, white acrylic yarn, worsted weight acrylic yarn, I don't stash like that. I do have a little left from my big purchase where I bought these from the Vanna's Choice, but it's not normally something that I stash unless, once again, we're looking at something that is more than 75% off for those mainstay basics that you get from big box stores or major online retailers. All that to say that over the last 15 years, I have curated my perfect yarn store here. Everything in here, more or less, has a project idea associated to it. It might not be, like a kitted up project, but like I knew I wanted an extra large granny Ruana and a sweater out of this. I know I want a striped color pop blanket out of this. I know some of this is going to a multicolor, multi-texture shawl. This is either going to be a sweater or an extra large shawl. More or less, as you move your way down through my stash, I know what these were kind of purchased in. This was a gift. So we don't talk about the Premier Basics collection. I received a beautiful gift of 2 of every color when they first launched this. This is what I have left now, but this was a completely separate thing, and I've used all of it but this cube of it. But most of the stuff I've purchased, whether I've purchased it at a 30% off sale and it's just something I love and wanted to make sure I got when I could, or whether it was one of those purchases that I made when they were 70% off and I was, stash buying. This is a curated stash of projects, or at least there's a vague idea for the projects, what I've purchased, what I've personally brought in. These all kind of have projects in mind for them. They're not just willy-nilly, as much as it seems so. They're not just willy-nilly in my stash. I purchased the quantities I would need for certain kinds of projects that those would be the yarns I would use for. So it is, as much as I feel like it's overwhelming in a lot of ways, my stash is actually a curated collection of soon-to-be projects. When I go to cast on something, having said all of that, and where I have set myself up for success in purchasing my stash, when I have that itch that I need to start something new. I'm jonesing for a new project. I need the high of starting something new, which I'm going to be honest, there is validity to that. It's just like the dopamine hit that you get when you finish something big. Starting something new, same thing. I get more of a endorphin rush from that. But when I do decide I want to cast on something, Generally, I will, like, while I'm doing something else, be thinking, do I want to do a shawl? Am I looking to do some socks? Do I want like a dishcloth? Do I just need that quick hit? Um, or am I looking, like, I'll start thinking, like, am I looking for something? Am I missing that, like, sit down and think about it project? Or am I looking for something mindless, enjoyable, peaceful, meditative type project? And from there, like, I might, shawls are one of my favorite things to just mindlessly work on, whether I'm knitting them or crocheting them. I have a number of different shapes and sizes that I make that are just, mental patterns that I have. Those are frequently one of the things where I'm just like, I haven't made a shawl recently. Let's go get a shawl quantity. So I'll come up here, look at what I have for shawls. I'll think, do I want to make a donation shawl? Am I making a gift shawl? Am I making a shawl for myself? And I'll be like, I want to make a donation shawl. So I'm going to grab those 3 carrying cakes in the beige. And that's what I'm going to work with. And then if I don't have a pattern where that's like, ooh, I know exactly what I want this to be today, I will go to Ravelry with that yarn, because now I'm like, ooh, I've got the yarn. I know I want a shawl. I'll go to Ravelry and I will put in, I've got 1,500 yards of this yarn. It's worsted weight. I want to knit, because a lot of times I'll know, do I want to knit or do I want to crochet? So I want to knit, and I'll go under the accessories, neck and something else, and click shawl wrap and see what patterns pop up. And I can do free, has photos, has a 4-star rating. If I end up with like 500 hits on my search, then I might, start narrowing that down a little bit for what I'm looking for. But that's how a lot of my projects will start. But I do also come up here and just kind of look around, and I'm like, ooh, I really want to work with that blue and gray DK weight yarn I have. What can I make with it? And I'll just take the yarn downstairs and do a general search on Ravelry. I've got 750 yards of this. It's DK weight. I might do like a hook size range or a needle size range just to help limit it even further. Once again, I might click free and in my library. But a lot of times that is how I start projects. I don't have a real firm idea when I come in here of what I want to do. I just know I want to work with that yarn, or I have a vague idea of, it's been a while since I made a pair of socks. Let me pick a sock yarn. And then I'll just cast those on, because I've been doing a lot of vanilla socks recently. But now there is that 10 to 15% of the time where I have a pattern that I've come across, on Pintrest, on Ravelry. There are groups that share new patterns that are being released on Ravelry. There are groups that have like the on sale patterns on Ravelry. And sometimes I do just happen to come across a pattern where I'm like, I need that. I need that in my life today. I need that project now. And in that 10 to 15% of the time, I will generally print that pattern, bring it up here with me, shop my stash. Very rarely do I not have something that will work, or some combo that will work for that project. There are times where, like, I will have things set aside, like I had the ALC set aside in a group and was like, I know I want to make a 5-color project with these. And then the perfect pattern showed up a few weeks later. But occasionally the pattern does come first. I've been very lucky most of the times having the yarn stash that I have curated for my preferences, the things I like making, the styles of things I like making. More often than not, I will have a yarn I can shop from my stash for that project. And that's part of why I wanted to go through the stash building exercise first, and how I built my stash and where my stash is now, because that does make shopping my stash for that other 10 to 15% so much easier. If you are a person who picks a pattern and then picks your yarn, if you do not have a carefully curated stash, you will almost never have the yarn you need for that pattern. If you really know what you like making, you like the styles, you like knitting these, but crocheting these, you will be able to build a stash that is curated to your preferences as long as you're mindful as you're building your stash, as long as you're thoughtful about how you work and how you process and how you come to make the projects that you make. Um, but having a curated stash that meets your needs, your expectations, your wants, your desires, your fancies, your whims will definitely, if you are a person who has a stash, will help you in those cases where you find that pattern first. But if you are a pattern first crafter, you really do run the risk, if you do not have a well thought out, well planned stash, of having to always buy new yarn. And I see this happen a lot in Facebook and on Instagram and stuff where like you find the perfect pattern, but you don't have the yarn for it. And a lot of that happens where we're impulse purchasing yarn without thinking about what we're buying. So we do have a lot of it. We do have a lot to draw from. But if we are more project oriented, not supply oriented, and we are making based on projects, not making based on supplies, we do run the risk, if we are not mindful as we're building our stashes, of never having what we need for the project we want to make and still having to go out and buy new yarn for it all the time. And that's not including those mainstays that we don't need to pay the storage fee on those. Really, let's let the stores and the manufacturers pay the storage fees on those. We will keep this for, our special deals. Now, another thing that probably sets me a little bit apart from other yarn crafters, and I know this for other people who knit and crochet, this is also true for them. We are a little bit process and a little bit product. I know a lot of people who are process crocheters, but product knitters, or they're process knitters and product crocheters. And what that means is I thoroughly enjoy the process of making something. It's one of the reasons why I finally, once I got over the hurdle of frogging things and just unabashedly, this isn't working, I'm going to rip it out, I didn't mind quite as much because I enjoy the process of making, whether the item gets finished or not. But I do also have that little bit of product in my ear too, where it's like, I want this. I want to wear this. I want to have this available to me. I want the dopamine hit of finishing this. And so I am a little bit product too. Mine's not driven more, knitting one, crochet the other. Mine is definitely more of like mood mindset. What kind of week am I having kind of thing. There are a lot of times where I just enjoy knitting. That's one of the reasons why I do a lot of basic shaped shawls. I like my vanilla socks. I enjoy the process of making the stitches. It's mindful, it's restful to be in that meditative state. It also keeps my hands busy if I want to like watch a TV show, actually sit down and take a break and watch a TV show. I'm not constantly hyped up. What do I do? What do I do? I ought to be doing something. Should I go do the dishes? Should I be vacuuming? Should I be, it kind of calms that part of my brain and allows me to be able to enjoy just chilling for a minute, which is a good thing to do sometimes. So, knowing what type of crafter you are, number one, will heavily dictate or should dictate how your stash is built. If you have a stash, it should heavily dictate how that stash is built. It also will probably dictate the types of projects that you do. Because if you are a process person, you really might be super into lace and cables and heavy textures and working with more interesting fibers. You may be one of those like mohair and everything kind of people, or slip that cheeky little bit of Angora into things. If you are a final product person, if you're looking for the finished object, the dopamine hit, you may actually be far more into like small amigurumi or dishcloths, tablecloths, things like that, hair accessories, scarves, hats, smaller projects versus those big projects that you just really sink into. And it may take you 2 years to finish it, but you're going to enjoy every stitch of it. And those once again, one is not bad or good. Those are individual personality types and individual styles. And like I said, I'm a little bit of both. And it really depends. Like right now, a lot of my projects are longer, bigger things. So like my socks are my little easy thing to relax into, or like the blanket I've been working on. While it's a big project and will take forever, it's simple stitches, and it's just as I'm working on it. So knowing and figuring out whether or not you are a product or process person is also key in building your stash, understanding how you're going to approach your projects, how you're going to think about your projects. Last page of notes. And then I'm going to go because this is already way longer than I meant it to be. I already covered. It's going to take you time. This isn't something in your first 3 or 4 years of knitting and crocheting you're going to know about yourself. It will take time, and it's going to take you analyzing, you know, what you're bringing in, what you're actually using, what were your finished objects. You know, think about, you don't have to list things like I do or take pictures of things like a lot of people do. You just think about what you're actually working on. What are you actually making? How are you actually working? What time of day are you actually working? May actually have heavily determine a lot of things. You know, if you're a nighttime knitter or crocheter after a long day of work, looking at computer screens and stuff all day, you know, you might want more of like the chunky yarns to work with. You might be more of a person, you know, if you like to make lighter weight garments and stuff, but you can't see by the end of the day. You know, you might be looking for something more like this, where it's easy to use, easy to see, easy to find, but isn't necessarily going to give you like the micro texture or something like that. But it takes time to discover that about yourself. It takes time to actually think about it. And again, what phase of life you're in, what stage of life you're in, what month of life you're in is heavily going to determine some of this. And those change. This isn't a once you are X, you are always X. You can't become a Y. And they change over the last 36 years. How I approach crafting, how I build my stash, how I think about projects has completely changed. Even my taste in yarns to some degree has completely changed since I was 12 years old. Because by the age of 12, I had been doing this for 6 years. And it's completely different than when I got married 20 years ago. And it's completely different than where I was 10 years ago. So these are variables. These are variable things that will change over the course of your crafting life. So you need to check in with yourself periodically. Just, you know, am I, you know, think about it just for a minute. You know, am I bringing in more than I'm using? Am I able to still see everything? Do I still love everything? I firmly believe everything in our lives, you need to go through and purge. And that doesn't mean you have to get rid of a ton of stuff, but just critically look at things and go, you know, I loved this when I bought this, but am I still in love with this? Am I really ever going to use this? I mean, there were yarns that I bought way back when like the chenille yarn was all the rave. I loved it at the time. And when I bought that yarn, when I bought that, I think it was Peyton's Bohemian. It could have been Mode Day Bohemian. I loved that yarn. Really and truly loved that yarn. Now, I'm glad I used it all because I don't love it so much. I don't like it like it used to. I don't think it's that good of a yarn anymore. Those things will change. And you either need to make the decision to use it, gift it, sell it. And in some cases, if we're not storing our yarn properly or well, or maybe this was gifted to us and it wasn't stored properly and well, we might need to, unfortunately, let it go. Let it go, let it go. We talked about purging. We talked about be patient. Well, be patient as you're taking time to figure this out. The last note here that I made for myself to mention and part of all of this and how I approach my craft space, my craft time, and making new projects. And this is kind of just a general for building your curated stash. Because like I said, a lot of how I approach things really does hinge on my stash. Please understand, if you have not used the yarn before, and this is a big word of caution, please hear me. If you have not used a yarn before, do not immediately bulk buy it. Now, I'm not saying like if Premier, unfortunately, my Premier section is really kind of out of sight now. If Premier launches a new anti-pilling yarn, and I am just absolutely in love with the colors, they have 8 different versions of anti-pilling yarn: anti-pilling colors DK, anti-pilling DK, anti-pilling worsted weight, anti-pilling variegated, anti-pilling that comes in cakes and has fruit colors. I can trust the quality, texture, and look of that yarn and be like, okay, I love every single one of these colors. I'm going to buy one of each, or I'm going to buy 2 of each, and this is what I'm going to do with them. But if this is a yarn that is from a manufacturer you don't normally purchase from or use a lot, if it is a yarn that is a texture or fiber content you don't use a lot of, don't bulk buy it before trying it. I've made this mistake a number of times. And some of it has been, I thought I could trust it, or I thought I could trust myself. Now, I do, once again, I have a lot of experience and I do purchase a lot of yarn online. So I do have a better eye to know me, myself, and what I like and what I'm looking for in a yarn. If you are not there yet, or if you do not trust it to purchase it online, don't purchase it in the store until you use it. Even then, because a lot of times I have found, and I know my friends have found, we purchase these yarns that we think we love. The skein feels great. The colors are phenomenal. I'm going to buy a bunch of this yarn. And we get it home. And by the time we do, maybe before we finish the first project, maybe we're into the second project with it, we're like, this is awful. This is horrible. I don't want to use this anymore. What am I going to do with this now? I want to burn it all. And this happens more often than people are honestly talking about. When they purchase a bunch of yarn at one time that they've never tried, from a line they've never tried, or even, a fresh line from a company they trusted, like the one bad yarn review I had here, where the yarn there were so many knots. It wasn't even. The plying was horrible on it. And like I said in the review, I was having a bad week, but the yarn I thought was awful. And there were a lot of people defending it. They had great experience with it. At the end of the season, they purchased tons of this, and they came across the same problems I was. Because, everybody else's review was great. Mine was the only bad one. And there were people who bought 20, 30 cakes of this yarn, and then they started seeing the same problems I had with the ones I bought. If you've used it, you loved working with it, you like it, it's safe to bulk buy. I do recommend, I know it's hard to do, but with the seasonal launches, we're seeing a lot of companies launching one season only yarns. Buy enough for a small project. Make that small project. Make a good swatch with it. Wash it. See how it washes and wears for a few days. Stick it in your pocket and carry it around with you for a day. It's a weird thing to do, but I'm telling you, you will learn so much about that yarn by keeping it in your pocket and carrying that swatch around with you all day. Wear it, tuck it under your shirt and see how it feels up against your skin for the day. Just discreetly tuck it in somewhere and see how it wears. Like if you're thinking this would be a beautiful sweater, don't buy 20 skeins of it. Buy one, swatch it, wash it, see how it feels, and then purchase it. If you once you do your swatch or your small project with it, if you still love it after that, buy away. But wait until you have some time with that before you make a bulk purchase of it. I wish more people talked about their experience with this. I wish more people were transparent about the mistakes that they've made in purchasing yarns in bulk. Now, I'm not saying, 2 or 3 skeins because, my cousin wants a hat and scarf that's purple, pink, and aqua, and I found some purple, pink, and aqua yarn. I've never used it before. I got it. The project was fine, but I hated working with it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you would buy like a case of yarn that you have never tried the yarn before. You know nothing about the yarn, nothing about the fiber content, and now you're stuck with it. I caution you, especially with these seasonal releases, they're cranking these things out super fast. And I don't always think the quality is there for a lot of these. Take the time to do a swatch. That way, if you're stashing it, it's not taking up that visual space. It's not taking up that visual clutter. When you come in to see your space, you will be able to shop your stash very quickly and easily. You'll be able to see what you have, and you don't have this big black hole somewhere in your stash of yarn you hate. Before you bulk buy, try it. Please just try the new yarn. And we see this with the seasonal releases, and we also see this with like the companies who are bringing yarns back in certain seasons with new colorways. Check this season's first and make sure it's just like last season's before you buy it in bulk. Also, once again, with time, you will be able to better discern from touch, feel, and even photographs of the yarn and understanding the fibers in the yarn better. With time, you will be able to better discern what you think you'll like and what you think you won't like in a lot of yarns, even just, online pictures or looking at the swatches of things. Also, looking at the hook size, recommended hook size, and needle size for things can tell you a lot about a yarn. If it's a super flexible yarn, you'll generally see like an eye hook for a worsted weight yarn. If it's a very inflexible yarn and it says it's a number 4 and recommends like a K hook for it, that's probably not a very soft yarn to work with. Just some experience there. Ask me how I know. Anyway, that is all I'm going to say for today. I really hate putting a super long video up on Thursdays, but we're just going to roll with it. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, fantastic day. I hope this helped you guys to understand better how I use my stash and how I come to new projects. I mean, I know we focused a lot on stash, but to be honest, this is the starting point for me. And this is critical for me to have correct for myself in my crafting journey and how I craft. So while I had a lot of tips and tricks that probably weren't shared in the how to build a stash wisely video or how to consider building a stash wisely, it is very critical for how I approach knitting and crochet as far as picking my new projects and what I'm going to do with them, how I find patterns for them. I mean, I really just use Ravelry or Pintrest and that's it. So I'm not particularly exciting, but it is what it is. So I hope you guys will share your experience as well. How do you process and approach these things? What have you learned about yourself as a knitter or a crocheter over the years? How do you, look at things and say, oh, I love that sweater. Let me find the yarn. Oh, I love this yarn. Let me find the pattern. How does that look for you? How does that process look for you? Do you shop your stash the same way I shop mine? If you are a stash haver, or are you, especially if you're one of those project monogamous people or minimal stash people, I would really love to have you weigh in because that's so not me, but I find you guys so fascinating. I love your process because it is so foreign to me and completely opposite of how my mind works. Please share down below because a lot of people in the social media space are more like me where they're very visual when it comes to picking things like this, and they want to have things, you know, nearby to be able to draw from whenever they feel like starting something. So, especially for those of you who have minimal stash or are very project monogamous, please weigh in the comment section down below, because I learned so much from you guys that I would never consider, just because your process is so different from mine. So please share. I love you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful, fantastic day. As always, I look forward to seeing you real soon. Bye, guys.